Right, so I realise that in the absence of having a graphical representation of the state of charge of my batteries at various time intervals, I've got a process going where I continually monitor the batteries by taking a reading of that voltage and state of charge across time by using my phone and the timestamps on the files, timestamps on the video files, to at least get a bit of a plot throughout time. Now, there's something going on where I have got to try to get this system of recording the performance data, because without that I'm trying to manage something that I'm not measuring. So before I get into a right tantrum with myself about how everybody else has got the most delightful internet monitoring, and despite buying a new inverter, I haven't got performance monitoring up and running yet. And in any event, I shall only ever have one side, because they're not. Well, there is some control bus technology on one, because they have got RS-232 or whatever it is, RS-485 output. So why has the manual not got this information on it? Or put it another way, you've sold me a machine with an RS-232 with a communications cable, and I do not know how to use that communications cable, and I do not see where people who are like me in my situation can quickly get to. This is how to get one of these machines recording its performance. It's most frustrating for me to have to try to continually manage it. In the way I'm doing, which consists of going out there, making some assessment of like, oh, it's a bit sunny today. Now I've got to do this, do that, save the electricity as this in hot water, that is in the heat pump, this in the something else. I've just been on a solar group all morning for the first half hour, waking myself up and I realised that the sun, the solar panels and the batteries and the consumers are a dynamic system. So in a dynamic system, not everything is predictable, because you don't know. Now, one thing I could do is I could switch a couple of batteries off, let them discharge right down, let the ones left on discharge right down, and then see if I can charge them up faster. But in order to do that, I need to know what the machine's figures are, literally minute by minute. I cannot write it down fast enough. I can't do the integration under the curve because the maximum mean point tracking is going up and down and changes in respect to the levels of light intensity. But we got nice sun this morning, whereas an hour ago it was pouring with rain and looked grey. Completely blue skies now. Yes, of course the weather changes. But it looks to me like we're going to have a day full of sun. I'm going to produce about 10 kilowatt hours by lunchtime, or something like that. And then the batteries are going to be full, and let's imagine that I was connected to the grid. I'd want to export everything I produced this morning, counting on the weather being what it's going to be this afternoon, beautiful. Therefore, batteries ready at night time. Would I rather discharge this morning? Yes, of course I would, because then I do a recharge at a certain time, and then yeah. So you effectively get 2 lots of export during the day, rather than none, rather than continuous. Now, on a flex tariff, or an intelligent flex tariff, how does that actually work? I must phone the firm, because we're making decisions today and the tariff may not exist tomorrow. Or they might change the rules of it so that the tariff rules change, and then you've told all your customers or your clients or whatever you want to regard them as that they are well, it's time to retune the system because there's a different tariff and a different supplier offering different rates, and you'll go with that instead. I'm fascinated by Octopus Flux, Intelligent Flux, and whatever, but now I realize, and now I understand that the rates change across where you are in the country. So how are we supposed to do that? And how are you supposed to use what today's rates are for 5 years out? It's just like what I've been doing in the past or what I did 35 years ago with the price of timber, except that I was there dealing with price size curves that was changing monthly, or only the data was only produced quarterly. Making 30 years decisions based on quarterly projections as opposed to yeah. Good thinking, Mr. Masters. I know I sound like I'm waffling, but what it used to be was you used to make a decision as to how, when you were going to fell the trees based on a price size curve that you felt was consistent, not a price size curve that was continually changing with time. Price size curves, yes, of course, they will depend on local demand and local transport costs from producer to consumer. So how does the uncertainty of price size, which is actually not called price size curve in electrical terms, it's going to be called half hourly cost projections for the next 48 hours, how do you manage forced discharge at the most opportune time in the next 8 hours? It's not going to consist of an individual like me looking at the sky and saying, "It's a blue sky, today we're going to have sun, switch to forced discharge at 10 o'clock. It's going to have to be an algorithm. And everybody's talking about algorithms these days. So what is that algorithm and how do we continuously improve that algorithm? Because that will be the key. And being cute about that, especially if you've got hundreds or hundreds of thousands of systems that you're turning on and off depending on where they are in the country, how on earth will you do an integration of all of that data in real time in order to make decisions at 6 o'clock in the morning according to the weather what you're going to do with your production today and how you're going to play the market? So what you would do is you do a number of what if calculations based on projected costs. No, they would be presumably actual costs. Are they, when does how does the individual machine receive an instruction on when to dispatch to grid? Start time of discharge, end time of discharge, size of system, safety regulations and whatever, but it annoys me that you cannot discharge self-consumption. People are obsessing about it. I saw a comment on some solar post where the bloke said, what was his use case? Oh, a heat pump. Well, there's absolutely no point in using your heat pump at first thing in the morning if it's cold outside. What you want to do is run the heat pump flat out for a certain number of hours when it's warmer outside. Is that worth it? Thermal store? Don't know. What I have got with compressed air is the ability to produce heat and store the energy. Optionally to take the heat out of the equation and put it into something else, or so to speak consume it, or store it. And with on-site microgeneration of heat to electricity as well as light to electricity, all sorts of possibilities open up, including multiple charges and discharges during the course of the day on small systems. The other side of what I'm trying to say is that the collaboration, small-scale collaboration between neighbors and possibly between neighbors who have different suppliers means that you get castes, so to speak, of different ants in the anthill, where some ants are basically discharging at higher rates, not discharge at higher financial benefit, and some are not. Now, who sets the tariffs? How are the tariffs communicated? And do the tariffs how often are they updated? How many tariffs do you want to consider? In order to reach the decision as to which consumer categories have to deal with which distributor. Basically, you've built a wind farm in Somerset. Now the Hinkley Point comes online, and then all of a sudden your power purchase agreement terms are going to change, and oh dear, it's just enough to drive you to distraction thinking about it. And I know this, and I'm not even grid connected, as I am in a self-preservation mode. I haven't even looked this morning, have I, to see whether or not what the state of charge was, whether when I switched it over at 1:30 in the morning, to see whether or not the battery level has gone down due to self-discharge or self-maintenance during the course of the night. Incidentally, I had to restart the bloody thing because for some reason it went into economy mode. Do not mind me, my coffee is not working yet this morning, is it? The combination of heat pumps and solar. I'm supposed to be having a conversation. I'm trying to have a conversation with Gary Does Solar. But it should be called something like Gary Does Renewables. Anyway, let's put it all on one video. 18 minutes. Everybody wants a simple answer. Right, we're all making plenty of noise up here. Noise levels would probably... Right, so present domestic consumption sits at 150 watts. That's not very much, is it? Looking at this. .7, 41%. The difference between my maximum cell and my minimum cell is 1.15 volts. I can live with that. What's this side looking like? Fully charged. I thought I'd swap this over. Harry must have swapped it back. Battery's at 29 volts. So this side is full. and charging. What does 29 mean? 29 means 14, nearly 15 volts. Yeah, but that's because it's charging at the moment. This one might be telling me that it's quote charging, but it's not. Because we can only tell that once we get into behind whatever COM does. PV's putting in 1 kilowatt. No, 829. 829 off of 10. Right. This will be enough to start this up. So I take the load. The sun is shining beautifully. No, not enough for it to start it. Alright, fair enough. This side will have enough to start it. Because that device doesn't power that, whereas this device does power that. Watch how this goes up, right? Once you put some load on it. I don't want to show the batteries, I want to show the PV in at the same time. Input to the battery is 3.35. Switch this on. Input to the battery drops to 1 kilowatt. Then it maintains at 1.3, 1.5, 1.6. Input is 3.7. If I turn that off, the input will drop down to 3. And then it builds back up to 3.5. So my light loads should sit on that side. 58. What does the 58 error code mean? Oh, Gordon Bennett. Turn that off for a second, just to get a chance of the machine to settle down. 58. What does this thing say next door to 58? 58 error. Fucking useless piece of information under the circumstances. And this is not being detected on my phone. Oh Christ, I'm irritated. Ah. Try to stay happy. Try to stay happy. This should be on an auto reset, which I've managed to trip out and put a 58 code on it. What do I want to do? Turn the solar off to reboot it? Switch off and switch on again? Not really. Fucking useless.
How did that battery show that it was that whatever it was when I last read it? Now it's at 25.8. Now I went into a panic mode for a minute because it was...
What did it say? 29 volts? This one's putting 3 kilowatts into 6 batteries. That'll do.
If this happens here, does this go up? Input.
Oh, God, sort it out in your head, for fuck's sake.